But Mr. Nduvi, how would you say that the government plans to address the concerns and fears of the public following these blackouts? Because, of course, the public has expressed some certain level of fear regarding the blackout, especially the worst one that was recorded on the 25th of August. So how does the government plan to take out this fear from the people of Kenya?
Thank you, Blessings, for hosting me, and allow me to greet Professor Iraki. He is a senior authority in policy and academia. I think we have met on several times at classes. So on the issue of power outage in Kenya, I would subscribe myself to what the professor said, that issues on transmissions are critical. But I begin by saying that from where I sit, I think the government needs to, look critical. For now, power outage affects Kenyans. One, I begin by saying that the approach by the government in addressing power outage seems to be disjointed, because of different agencies that are talking about the power outage issues, not substantially, but from an isolated position. So I propose a situation where the government, using a one government approach, can sit down as a common entity and look at the whole loopholes that are leading to the, frequent power outage in the country, and especially when we are celebrating 60 years of independence, we should not have recurrence of power outage in Kenya. They attribute this to, institutional inefficiency, in the sense that we lack effective collaboration of the various state entities that are dealing with energy transmission, to come together and look at the critical issues. Where are the gaps? Where are the lapses? And how to what extent they affect, the economy of Kenya. I know professors alluded that we lack information or adequate data on to the extent of damage that the blackout has caused to this country. And one of the key things is the need for the government, to have some sort of emotional intelligence to feel and appreciate the need of Kenyans, and the sense that their issues or their businesses are being affected by the power outage. And this, of course, aggravates the situation that there is a high cost of living, making the government look as if it is not more concerned about the issues of the common system.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Nduvi, for that. We're hoping that we get a clearer audio from you, but in the meantime, Dr. Iraki, now a lot of times when things like this happen, you hear the government of different countries tying it to lack of infrastructure or undeveloped infrastructure, and that's talking about power outages now. So do you think that the infrastructure in Kenya plays any part in the power outages? And if it does, what good would it be, or how would it affect the power outages if the infrastructure in Kenya is worked on?
I think there's a very famous saying that you don't put new wine in old skins. So in the last 10 years, Kenya has been very vibrant in terms of producing power, particularly geothermal, then wind power, hydro, and Kenya is renowned for renewable. In fact, the president the other day said that by 2030, probably 100% of our power should be coming from renewable. So Kenya has been very good. A lot of investors have poured money into power generation. But my argument is that we have not put enough investment in power transmission and power distribution. So the infrastructure for transmitting power has not been invested enough. And that's why I'm insisting that we need to have more investment in terms of infrastructure, the power transmissions, the high voltage transmission, so that the power you produce can be moved from one point to another. So if power is produced in hydros in central Kenya, it should be able to be moved or to be evacuated to the other parts of the country, like Western Kenya, where it is needed. If Kenya is produced in Ethiopia and is being transmitted to Kenya in a part of the country, it should easily be done that way. So I think the state of infrastructure is not good enough. But we cannot also forget that it's not just a question of technical transmission. We also have the management. So we must make sure that the people who manage power in this country do their work, they do their homework. Because it's very easy to predict how much power will be produced in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years, and by so project what will be the infrastructure requirements. So we need just to invest in power transmission like any other business, and we are going to get return. We are going to make sure there are no blackouts. As I said earlier, Kenyans have become more dependent on power than any other time in the past, and that is affecting productivity in our homes, in our offices, industries. In a country where we are talking about creating more jobs, in a country where we are talking about raising the standards of living, in a country where we are talking about achieving Vision 2030, we cannot do that without reliable power transmission. We must invest in that.
Let's take a look at South Africa, for example, with the constant load shedding, right? Do you think that these countries have similar problems? I know that for Kenya, for example, it's not exactly as constant as the ones experienced in South Africa, but do you think that there are generic measures that can be adopted by these African countries to tackle the issue of load shedding or power outages?
I was talking to a South African recently who visited me, and she had an app, and the app tells you when there will be load shedding. So you can check an app that there will be a blackout or a load shedding from this hour to this hour. And that's not the approach we should take. All these countries that have power transmission problems, power generation problems, I think it's just because somebody is not doing his homework, whether it is South Africa, whether it is Kenya, or any other country. Because power is something very tangible. We can predict the population growth. We can predict how many people will need power in the next 10 years, the next 20 years. And we do appropriate investment in power generation, power transmission, and power distribution. But remember, one of the biggest problems in African power system is that it's usually a monopoly. It's usually owned by the government. And when there's no competition, all the issues that come up with competition, innovation, efficiency, and so on, come into play. So maybe one of the ways we can make power transmission in Africa, power generation and power distribution more efficient is to bring in competition. You have seen what has happened when the industry is open to competition. Innovation comes in, efficiency comes in. So maybe that's one way we need to do as far as power transmission is concerned, whether it's South Africa, whether it is in Kenya, whether it is in other countries. We need probably more private sector playing its role in all these sectors of power generation, power transmission, and power distribution. I think the private sector can play a role in solving this problem, not just the government.
My next question to Mr. Stephen Nduvi. Now, let's say that investigations carried out and we do find out that truly it has to do with sabotage or cover-up, like we mentioned earlier. What measures can be taken to hold accountable those who are responsible for any of these acts? Mr. Nduvi, the question was for you.
I begin by saying that if investigations reveal that there was sabotage in, the entire process of the power outage, from a governance perspective, there are policies, institutional policies that guide, operations. There are standard operating procedures, and they define how you are supposed to be rewarded or you are supposed to be punished in case of an omission or in case you do something great. So I believe in line with the Kenyan Constitution and within the Public Officer Ethics Act that guide, how public service is operated, then the government should take the correct measures. But for me, I believe from the perspective of, good governance, the first point is for those who are responsible to take accountability and the ownership of the mistake, and perhaps resign from their positions, say that they are incompetent, they allow others to take over. Then again, I also propose a situation whereby the government embraces, a coordinated communication from all the state agencies, because we see a situation from where the communication is complex, such that you cannot really point a specific failure to a specific institution. So if we have a collaboration in resolving this issue, So perhaps they can identify a key institution that has been the greatest witness, in promoting or in ensuring that there is this consistent power outage. So there's need for that, for the government to, review their systems, especially even internal systems, like a critical infrastructure like JK here. We need to look at how the procurement for the generators was done. Was it flawed? And if it was flawed, has action been taken to do so who supervise the procurement of such critical infrastructure? And also whether internally at organizational level, whether there are, frequent systems audits, whether those generators are working such that in case there is a power blackout, then they are able to pick up promptly. So if those things they need to be evaluated such that you get to the bottom line of the, of the power outage at specific critical institutions and at specific places of power transmission. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Nduvi. Now, Dr. Iraki, my final question. How do you think that this situation would highlight the importance of investing in renewable energy sources? And I'm not just talking about for Kenya now. I'm talking about for every African country, especially the countries that grapple with these issues of power outages and load shedding.
Something that we need to remember is that when you have power shedding or road shedding or power blackouts, they give the country a bad image. No investor wants to come to invest in a country where they don't have a reliable power source, because power is one of the most important inputs in manufacturing, investment. Whether it is in services, whether it's production, you need power. So what we need to do in Africa is to focus on the whole power generation system. My feeling is that we focus too much on power generation, but we don't focus enough on transmission. We don't focus on utilization. Whether it is renewables, whether it is non-renewables, I think we have had a lot of investment in those areas, but we have not had enough emphasis on the other aspects of power transmission and power distribution. So we need more investment in that area in Africa, and that is the only way we are going to get people confident that we have reliable power. They can come and invest, they can come create jobs, and make Africa a more livable place. Remember, a lot of people want to come and invest in Africa, but one of the big impediments happens to be power, because power is used everywhere. So we hope that in future, the African countries are going to make sure that they attract investors, not just in power generation, but also in power transmission, power distribution, and more so bringing in a bit of competition. And then Africa will have an image that will attract investors. People will be happy, people will be able to start industries, people will be able to run services, and the continent will prosper.
Well, hopefully so. This is a good note to end it on. Dr. Iraki, economist in Nairobi, Kenya, and of course, Mr. Stephen Nduvi, governance and public policy consultant and analyst, also in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us to discuss the issue of power outage in Kenya on the show. We appreciate your time with us.
Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
My pleasure. Now, this is still VSA, and we are still talking about issues that pertain to the African continent. When we come back, we'll take a look at the spread of anthrax across some east and southern part of Africa and what to do to solve the situation. Do stay with us.